laboriously over the paddies and jungles of North Vietnam, this nation of peasants who still farmed with oxen, who fought in sandals, and whose weaponry he thought would never down a pilot like him in an airplane like an A-4 Skyhawk. Yet they'd bagged him. He'd pulled out of a perfect low-level run over the rural district of Ting Za and watched his shower of explosives dance across a row of boxcars filled with supplies for communist guerrillas in South Vietnam. Then he'd headed straight for the clouds. Before he could reach them, a string of 57mm shells ripped into the Skyhawk's starboard side. In the cockpit, he'd felt impervious to the dangers of battlefields below. The hits shattered that sense of invincibility. The plane pitched down, and all control slipped away. Jim was yanked forward into his shoulder harness, then slammed back into the seat as the Skyhawk plummeted toward the ground. As he struggled with the controls, he spied the blue sea just 3 miles away. If he could hold the plane together for a few more seconds, he could reach the Gulf of Tonkin, where he'd eject and rescuers could fish him from the waves. Instead, the Skyhawk continued its dive, which would inevitably end in a fiery crash. Jim had only seconds to escape. He tried in vain to lift his arms against the G-forces to reach the overhead ejection ring. With the ground growing larger in his windshield, he grasped the alternate ejection handle between his legs and pulled. The jet's canopy shot off, and the seat rocketed Jim out of the aircraft. He registered pain as he tumbled through the sky. By the time his parachute deployed, he knew he'd been injured, but he couldn't process it. Only seconds separated him from the ground, and he spent them hoping that the bullets slicing away at his parachute would miss his helpless body. The chute drifted closer to the trees, and its canopy snagged a limb, leaving him suspended just above the main thoroughfare in a small village. Still hanging in his harness, he watched as a mob of townspeople began running toward him. He released the latches on his harness and dropped onto the muddy street. A surge of villagers knocked him down and began pummeling him with fists, clubs, or whatever they had, hitting wherever they found an opening. Someone knocked him hard on the head. Above the din, he could hear a distant whistle, a police officer, salvation from the relentless bludgeoning. The crowd stepped back, still encircling him menacingly. Under direction from the constable, several boys stepped forward and began cutting away Jim's clothes, his flight suit, his T-shirt, the red polka-dot boxers Sybil had bought him during his last shore leave. The officer pointed at Jim's leg, and for the first time he looked at his body. The ejection had completely shattered his left knee. The leg was now bent 60 degrees to the side. He tried to move his left arm. It didn't respond. Jim had forgotten to grab his right wrist with his left hand as he pulled the ejection lever. Consequently, his left arm had flailed freely during his exit from the cockpit, doing untold damage to his shoulder, which seemed dislocated if not shattered. He thought the force of the exit had also broken his back. He heard jets overhead, and his spirits momentarily rose. Then he saw villagers concealing the parachute that would have caught their attention, or at least indicated that Jim had landed safely. Now, nobody would know if he had survived. Not his wingmen, not his squadron, not his government, not his wife, not his 4 boys. Nobody. As the mob dragged Jim through the street, naked, bloodied, crippled, and humiliated, he steeled himself for what would come. He knew it would get much worse. Still, he'd never imagined anything as horrible as the floor of this cell. Nearly 800 days had passed since he'd involuntarily parachuted into North Vietnam, and he saw no prospect of release. He wondered if he would exist like this, a maimed, blinded animal, for the rest of his life. The night of October 25th, 1967, found him lying on his floor as usual, inhaling the room's stench, his stench, almost oblivious to the mosquitoes that feasted upon him, when suddenly he heard a key turning in his cell door and guards entered his squalid world. They removed his blindfold and cuffs. They ordered him to roll up his bamboo sleeping mat and gather his few belongings. They helped him to his feet and motioned for him to follow. He hobbled along after them, swinging his left leg outward with each painful stride, trying to maintain his balance. A guard blindfolded him again for a short ride in a jeep, about 8